So the book that you were given, this was supposed to be like one of those little pictures like a child would draw and put on the front of the refrigerator. You know, this is mom. So this is like this is our family, right? There's me. There's my beautiful wife. See how beautiful Tina is? That's gorgeous. And then there's little Tyler with the baseball bat, William with the golf club, and you can see Sarah had just got her first cell phone, and so that was the whole world to her at that time. The funny thing about this, and all of you men will love this, and all of you ladies, sweet ladies, will identify with this, like how can you mess that up? It is what it is. The poor artist that came up with this design had to go back and correct it 5 times because my wife did not like the way that she was drawn. And so
the skirt was a little...
The skirt was not right, the legs were too long, the hair was
like,
too...
look, if I'm going to get drawn, let's just go ahead and draw it, ideally.
So every time I see this book, I think about... The book was easy, but getting that picture of Tina right, my goodness.
I needed a little...
So I just want y'all to know when you read this, when you take this home and you read it, look at that picture and go, poor Steve, that guy had to get that picture right of his wife, but it mattered. I learned that it mattered. You get those stick figures. Whew, man. All right, so we're going to talk about some practical tips, and then we're going to jump into it. I came across just recently some quotes that I want to share with you guys. I'm going to let my sweet wife read these to you guys because when I read publicly, it's like terrible. And so, honey,
All
why
right.
don't you read these quotes for
Having
us?
kids is the pinnacle of the human experience. There is no greater height of love. There is no more profoundly transformative spiritual and emotional experience in a person's lifetime. There is no next level. Holding and loving your children is the top of the mountain.
Isn't that awesome? That's a good one. Okay.
All right, here's another one. Fathering is not something that perfect men do, but something that perfects the man.
I don't even know who Frank Pittman is, but he hit it, nailed it.
All right, here's children don't need TV, children don't need iPads, children don't need YouTube, children don't need new toys, children don't need video games, children don't need expensive clothes. Children need their parents and grandparents. And grandparents.
And grandparents.
They need us.
Okay.
All right, here's one. The greatest gifts that you can give to your children: laughter, forgiveness, your attention, unconditional love, and hearing the gospel. None of these cost a dime.
Just a little reminder.
All right.
All right, so I want you to write these 3 things down. Here are 3 things that your kids, just practical tips. Here's 3 things that every one of us in this room want, and it's 3 things that your kids want. Every single person in this room, we want love and care. We crave it. We want it. We desire it. We want to know that there's somebody that loves for us. We want to know that there's somebody that cares for us. We want to know that we are missed, that we matter, and that there is somebody that's going to care. And I will tell you that your kids, they do not miss out on this. They want love and care. Second thing that they want is a model to follow. Role models played a huge part in my life. I was an athlete going through high school, college, and stuff like that. And man, whenever I saw like a guy that maybe he played in the NFL and he was a believer, and man, I was watching the way that he was trying to, reflect Christ in the way that he was doing his sports. So like, man, I just thought, man, that is the coolest thing in the world, trying to find a model to follow. Life is really confusing. Life is really complex. There's all of these battles out here. There's all of these things that we're going to talk about in a little bit, social media and all of this stuff. But there's also a battle that's going on in here. And when your child can see a model to follow in their parents, in their grandparents, man, what a comforting thing that is for them. And then the third thing that your child is looking for is truth to build their life on. I want you to know this. If you are a Christian, we have the best argument. We have the best truth. To try to make sense of the world from a academic, from an intellectual standpoint, there's no one that has a better argument than Christians. I was listening to a gentleman last week. His name is Brent Beshore, and he was an atheist. And Brent Beshore, by the time he was 31 years old, he owned $300 million. The value of his company portfolio was $300 million. So here's a little 31, 32-year-old young punk atheist, and he owns this huge portfolio of business, but he's miserable. And he's got a brilliant mind. He's really smart, but in his late 20s and his early 30s, man, he starts wrestling with these arguments of the universe and eternity and all of these things. And he's like, man, after I studied all of these things, the only one that really made great sense to me was Christianity. And now this guy is, if you follow him, Brent Beshore, on social media and stuff, it's like, is this guy like a pastor, or is he like a businessman? Like Jesus. I mean, he does apologetics on Twitter. It's really fascinating following him. There was a guy that used to be a professor up at University of North Georgia, UNG. His name was Dr. John Raber. Did any of you ever heard of Dr. John? One person? Well, Dr. John Raber, I think he was kinesiology. Brilliant guy, PhD, smart guy, one of the professors up there. When he was studying his PhD, he was doing his dissertation on the eyeball. And here he is, he's an atheist, does not know Jesus, was not raised in church. He became a believer by just studying the human eyeball. And he's like, Steve, if you knew everything that I know about just the eyeball, there's no way that you cannot be a believer in creation and Jesus. Just from the study of the eyeball, there's no way that just the eyeball could evolve out of a mud puddle, let alone two of them and a nervous system and everything, all of the components that make the eyeball work with moisture. And he goes into this long, thing about the eyeball. But we are looking for truth to build our lives on. And so that's one of the most wonderful things that as they're trying to make sense of this confusing world, you're able to continually take them back to truth. And if you'll continue to do that, it just continues to make sense and to make sense and to make sense. Now, I will tell you that if you're talking about a son or daughter that's running hard away from God, at that time of their life, it may not make great sense to them, but you're just going to have to keep putting truth in front of them. Okay, so let's go through just 7 tips. We call these 7 tips from battle-tested parents. That's Tina and I. Like I said earlier, I was a wrestler, so I know what it's like to get out on the mat and wrestle. And I just met this young couple down here, the wife from the Soviet Union, and when I was in college, I wrestled in Russia, and that was a lot of fun. And so I've got to be battle tested. I thought I was battle tested as an athlete wrestling the Russians, but then I got married, and then we had kids, and then I was really battle tested. That was the real wrestling match. And so let's talk about some of these tips.
You want to start with the first one?
You want me to do the first one?
Yeah, you do the first one.
So the first one is you need to take a reality check. Every issue is not a 10, so pump the brakes.
And you kind of gave an example of that earlier.
Yeah, I
about
gave
the
an
grocery
example of
store.
that. I gave an example of that earlier about the lady at Walmart, whatever. But, I mean, everything is not DEFCON 7, right? Everything is not the biggest, And I think what happens is a lot of times as parents, our ego and our pride is wrapped up into this whole gig of how we identify ourselves. And so we want our kids to act a certain way and to be perfect because, these little angels that reflect us as they're out and about all over the place. And there is a truth to that. But every single issue that we're trying to deal with, I will go through this with my adult children sometime. I'm like, hey, you brought this issue up. How big of an issue, you're saying all of my kids are basically business owners. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But this issue that you're, like, if you were to put this on a scale of 1 to 10, how big of an issue is it? Well, in my business, it's pretty big. I said, okay, well, let's start from top. This issue that you're mentioning right now, are they talking about it in Congress today? Oh, no. It hasn't escalated to that yet. So they're not having Senate hearings over this issue today. Okay, so we know that it's not. If that's a 10, we know that's not happening. Okay, and we'll just back it all the way down, and by the end of the conversation, they'll go, Dad, I get your point. It's probably like a 3. It's not that big of an issue. But in our world and what we're trying to do, it's kind of a big, and so understanding issues that you're facing for what they are, it helps you deal with them a little bit better.
Yeah. So the second one is variety is good. Parenting is like golf swings. They are all different. So, before you have kids, and we were in ministry and around a lot of families, and then we did student ministry and around a lot of teenagers, and let me tell you, the list was long about what our kids were not going to be doing, right? And we would not allow our kids to be like that, right? So this is all pre-kids. And then the Lord has a sense of humor, right? So you have children. So be very careful, even in the midst of parenting, about judging other families and how they parent, right? We're all different. We all have different personalities. Our children are different personalities, and then how those personalities mesh. Variety is good, right? And one way that you actually see that is when you have a family of multiple children. So Steve's sister has 5 girls and 1 boy, okay? And they all got married, had kids, and boy, we're just sitting there looking around the room, the variety of every child and how that family is disciplining their children, how they speak to their children, just how they are. You really get to kind of see it. These all grew up in the same household with the same mom and dad, and they're all different, right? And so Chris and Trina will get to see that now, and seeing their kids. And the girls are going to parent differently, right? And if you have multiple children. And it's okay. So variety is good. Learn what you can from your community and take it in, but don't be judgmental for other families and how it's easy for us to do that. Well, our kids don't act like that because we discipline our kids better than they do.
Yeah, how many of you guys homeschool your kids? Okay, how many of you guys in this room, your kids go to some type of private school? Okay, how many of you have kids that are in public school? Okay, so it's kind of a mixed bag, right? Which one of those is the right one? Huh? Yeah, the one that works for you,
That's
right?
right.
So just let it be. Tina was talking about my sister's kids. I love Sandra. My sister, she's one of those, she's my younger sister, but she's kind of like my boss. She loves telling me what to do, and I do it because I don't want to get in trouble. And
I just call her when I want her to get on too.
yeah, they tag team on me, and it works. So, Tina's like, hey, do you want me to call Sandra? I'm like, no, it's good. I'll do it. What? Sandra will drive up here and talk to you, honey, if you don't get this straightened out. I'm like, never mind. I'll conform. But Sandra, I watch her. Like we were down at my mom and dad's not too long ago, and one of her daughter's kids wanted some milk. Well, she just went into the refrigerator, to my mom and dad's refrigerator, opened her refrigerator, and grabbed a gallon of milk. So you've got like a 4-year-old holding a gallon of milk. The gallon of milk weighed more than this little girl. The gallon of milk is upside down, barely leaking, coming through the living room. And of course, like I'm watching this, I'm like, I'm helicopter parent, I'm ready to jump. Oh my God, oh. And I'm looking around the room like the world's about to end. Look at this little girl with a gallon of milk. It's upside down, the lid. And I look over there at her mom, and I'm thinking that her mom's going to see this and like just and rescue. Her mom looked over there and saw her with that gallon of milk. She's like, so anyway, what I was telling you was, and then I'm like, okay, well, maybe she just glanced and didn't see it. Well, then the husband looked over there and saw it. Didn't blink an eye. Didn't even slow. He's like, and this little girl's just walking through there's 15 grandkids and stuff, and this little girl's carrying and Tina's about to really have a coronary because she's got to get this thing. But I'm going to tell you, this mom and this dad, their kids are awesome.
Yeah.
And then, one of their kids, man, she's really smart. One of my sister's kids, really, really smart. And they homeschool their kids, and like their kids, like they pronounce words. They're like little bitty boys. They pronounce words. They're really, really smart. They're awesome kids. They love their kids. Like on Thursdays, they have like this school project thing that they do where they just literally drive up into the mountains over near Helen, and there's like 6 moms that take all of their kids go up there, and the kids just jump in the creek and play and pick up rocks and throw rocks and look at the trees. And sometimes they'll go up there. It's November, December, January, jumping in the creek. It's freezing. They don't care. They let them jump in the creek, hang out. And you want me to tell you something? If you met these 2 little boys, you would want to gobble them up and take them home with you and go. Like one of those kids, I don't have favorites. He's my favorite. His little clay man, he stole my heart, this guy. But they're all doing it different. It's a variety. Yeah, yeah. It's good. So let it go.
So number 3 is prioritize laughter. Create reasons to laugh. And Steve, if you're married, there's probably one of you that does a better job of this than the other. Usually you don't have 2 kind of cut-ups and trying to little mischief or making the kids laugh or whatever. Steve is that person. As a matter of fact, when we would be in church, when the kids were little, I was raised in a church by my parents that
be reverent.
Be reverent when you're sitting in church. You got your Bible out. You pay attention. You do not talk in church. I got a spanking one time for misbehaving, laughing in church. But you were reverent, right? Well, sometimes Steve with our kids, he'd be over there drawing stuff and he'd be making them laugh. And he's one of the pastors, right? And I'm mortified. I'm like, am I going to have to send all of them out? I was going to have to kick him. I'm like, you can't act like this in church. But Steve is the one that just makes our kids laugh. And the kids liked sitting by me at church. Yes, they did. They did not like sitting by their mom. I was boring. But it's good to laugh. Even with no kids in the home, Steve always makes a point to make me laugh, right? I'm the more serious type, and I can get zoned in and work and doing other stuff, but laughter is good. Yeah, I would just, prioritize laughter. Yeah.
You need to make laughter part. I don't know what your salsa is, but you've got your own flavor of salsa. You don't have to like it the way that I like it, and it's fine. But you have but one of the things that you have to mix into your special salsa is laughter. Mm-hmm. Laughter needs to be there. You want me to tell you two of my most dearest friends that do this better than anybody is this man right here and that lady right there, Chris and Trina. If you go over to their house, how many of you have been to their home? Okay, every single person, you guys are brand new. You haven't even been here that long, and you've already been to their house. Okay? Hello. They invite people in their home. You know what you're going to do if you go to their house? You're going to leave. You're going to go in there with a belly like mine, and by the time you get to your car, you're going to have like a six-pack. Because you've laughed so hard going to their home. We were talking the other day because we're about to go on vacation with Chris and Trina. And Trina said, man, I've been on this diet. I really wanted to go on this diet. And, she said, man, I was doing really good. And then I looked in the mirror, and I felt like a can of biscuits that had been popped open. Is that how you said it?
A busted can of biscuits.
Busted can of biscuits. How in the world do you even come up with this stuff, right? And we were just in her kitchen just dying laughing. And so, laughter needs to be a part of it. And here's why. Is it any mistake that if you look at Chris and Trina, every one of their kids and their husbands, the ones that are married, they all love going to mom and dad's house. They go over there, they like the free food, that helps. But man, they stay there forever because when you're at their house, you're just going to have a good time. It's awesome. So make laughter a priority.
All right, number 4, understand the power of words. Some of us need to think before we speak, right? Because once those words are spoken, they're forever heard, right? Now, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to say things that we didn't mean. You're going to do that in a marriage. You're going to do that with your kids. That's when you go and apologize and say, I should have never said that. That's better than that child taking those words through adult life and never hearing that mom or dad was sorry for saying those things to them. We're going to make mistakes. But be preemptive about that and try to think before you speak to your children, especially, again, if you're angry or upset. And even as you speak to one another in front of your children. Remember that before you start having a conversation or argument in front of your children. We don't really want our children to grow up thinking that we have a perfect marriage, right? We need to model forgiveness for one another, and they're going to understand as they get a little older when there's a little tension in the room, right? But we don't have to air out our dirty laundry in front of them, right? And let them hear all those things that are apologized for later. So
I shared this at the marriage conference. The man and woman go to a counselor, and the counselor says, well, Mr. and Miss Wright, what seems to be the problem? And the husband said, well, the problem is every time me and my wife get in an argument, she gets historical. And the counselor said, don't you mean hysterical? He said, no, I mean historical. She brings up everything I've ever done wrong and everything I've ever said. So when Tina says right there, you need to understand the power of words, you're going to hear those words again, especially the ones that you've... The other thing that we're trying to say, though, as it relates to your kids, we talk all the time, but there are statements that you are making about your kids that are constant statements. And you need to be careful with that ongoing statement that you're making about your kids. I'm going to give you 2 really good statements that you need to make. If you have daughters, you know what one of the statements you need to make? You are beautiful. 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 You know how many times you need to say that? A bazillion times. If you have sons, a statement that you need to make to your sons and about your sons before ball games, after school, before school. You just need to look at your son and say, son, I'm not too worried about you. You know why? Why, Dad? You've got what it takes. You got what it takes. And when you tell your son that he has what it takes and that you believe in him, and that comes from the top down, from the president of the home, you, the dad, you know what your son's going to grow up believing? Hey, the world is caving in. I've got a big test. This issue's going on. My dad's been telling me my whole life I've got what it takes. It's time to step up to the plate and knock this ball over the fence. Okay, so those are statements.
So
those are powerful words.
The powerful words, we kind of think of the negative, but we really want to concentrate on the positive, right? The positive of power words to them. One of the things that growing up, and I don't know why, not just about what we say to them, but Steve mentioned this, about what we say to others in front of them. One of the things that my mom did well that I didn't realize until I became a parent is my mom would always say in front of other people, Tina, and I would just be in the background hearing this, right? She didn't necessarily say it so I could hear it, although
She did.
She probably did. But I'm so proud of Tina. Mm-hmm. She's everything I would want in a daughter. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, just hearing those, and as an adult, a 53-year-old adult, guess what is still playing in my mind? Right? And so if it doesn't come natural for you to be an encourager to your children or even to speak positively about them, make an effort to do that. It really does matter. And just as a parent comes up to you or somebody else comes up to you and compliments you on your children, man, those words are sweet to our ears, right? Remember to compliment to other parents about their children. And let's keep doing this in front of even other kids that we're surrounded with.
Yeah, so last weekend we had a family over at our farm, and they have 5 teenage boys.
They're in the thick of it.
They're in the middle of hell on roller skates, let me tell you. And my daughter, son-in-law, and Bennett were there at the house, and Micah. And so as soon as all of these boys show up, now, every one of these boys are like 6 feet, 6'2", whatever. They're big boys. The smaller one's in middle school, but he's still kind of big compared to my 4-year-old granddaughter. Well, my granddaughter runs upstairs. This is Papa's farm, but now these boys, big, huge giants, are walking in. So all the boys walk into the living room with their mom and dad, and they're getting ready to eat and all of that kind of stuff. And I noticed that Bennett is sitting up there kind of by herself. And I said, Bennett, come here. What are you doing? She said, well, Papa, when there's new people around, I'm a little bit shy. And I said, I'm about to go in there and tell those boys who's the boss of the farm. And I think you need to be with me when I tell them, don't you? And she's like, yeah, I probably do. So I pick Bennett up, and I walk in there and say, hey, boys, y'all come here. I said, we're so glad to have you at the farm today, aren't we, Bennett? I go, one of the things that you need to know when you're at my farm, you need to, we've got cows, we whatever, but you need to know who the boss is. Right, Bennett? Yes, they need to know. I said, Bennett, who's the boss of the farm? She said, she's not pointing at me, she's pointing at herself. She said, I'm the boss of the farm. I said, so boys, we're glad you're here, but while you're here, she's in charge. And she's the boss, so if she tells you to go jump in the swimming pool, you go jump in the swimming pool. She tells you to go jump in the pond, you go jump in the pond. If she tells you to stop, whatever she tells you to do, you do it. Do you understand me? And they're like, yes, sir. I said, Bennett, is there anything else? She said, no, but, I am the boss, and so she goes into this thing. Well, these words are powerful. right? And
Now, we have to tell her when she goes home, don't tell that to your mom and daddy.
yeah, it doesn't work.
This is grandparenting.
This is
101 right
grandparenting.
here.
So,
That may come back to bite us one day.
but what I'm trying to do with my 4-year granddaughter, people show up at my house, you didn't just get bumped. They need to line up and understand you're the one in control, not them. And it's so funny because people start showing up at the house and, she's only 4. Papa, you need to go tell them. I mean, she knows. Okay.
All right,
next.
number 5, self-limitations. Don't let this set in early that I don't do this.
This one drives me crazy. I'll go hang out, meet somebody. Hey, you want to go? You want to go shoot? We've got some bows. You want to go shoot? Some targets. Well, Mister, I don't do that. Oh, okay. Well, I've got some rifles. You want to go shoot that or? I don't shoot rifles. Oh, post hole diggers. You know how to do that? Well, no, I don't do that either. You've got to be very careful letting your child, by the age of 13, define their life by all of the things that they don't do. Well, I don't do that. Well, I don't do that. Well, I can't do that. I don't do that. I'm like, how in the world can you be 16 years old and 90% of your life is defined by all of the things that you already don't do? That is a bad trajectory to set your kids on. I would rather have my kids try something new every day that they're terrible at, something that they're experiencing that they become, maybe they fell at it or whatever. But boy, I definitely do not want them at a very young age to start trying to identify their life by all of the things that they don't do. Because if you start that as a 4-year-old, 4th grader, 10th grader, 11th grader, 12th grader, 22-year-old, 28-year-old, and you've got a boss, you've got somebody there wanting you to do this, or maybe you're wanting to start your own. Well, hey, I don't do that. Well, I can't do that. Be very careful about letting that set in early.
Setting in limitations. All right, how many of you ever set up a lemonade stand? Anybody try to do that? Have you had your kids want to do that? How many of you have ever had a kid come to you and say, Mom, I need to go around to the neighborhood because I just picked all these rocks up and I'm going to go sell them? That was me. Our kids, I don't know what it was, but they were always coming up with stuff they wanted to make money, sell. It was this little entrepreneur, which we loved, right? I mean,
Greed.
I had to put a stop to the selling the rocks. I thought our neighbors might think we were crazy. You cannot go sell rocks door to door. But foster entrepreneurship, right? And not only are we teaching them, you've got to work to make money, right? If you want that new toy, Mom and Daddy aren't going to always just hand out and give you everything that you want, right? If you want to do some extra chores to earn money, we see how this works, right? So you want to foster entrepreneurship. One of the other things that you're teaching them is if that rock selling, I probably should have done this. It would have taught her that,
Well,
failing
there
is
was a guy
okay.
that did the pet rocks, and he
did too. I mean, who knew?
He sold rocks.
Yeah, he sold rocks. They painted them, and it's now a thing. But teach your kids the joy of failing. Like, not everything is going to work. You set up a lemonade stand, you only sold 2 cups of lemonade. That's okay. We'll try again. We'll do something different. Let's add a little something else to it. But you're teaching them it's okay to fail because you got to keep trying, right? That's the most successful businessmen and women in the world. Do you think they've ever failed? They have failed many times along the way.
Okay, so this is a big one for us. It may not be a big one in your family, but it's big for us. I think before your child finishes high school, you should encourage them to start a business.
Mowing lawns. How many of your anybody have kids that mow lawns or does something like that? I mean,
Yeah.
there's something.
When When I was in college, I started a business right here in Gainesville, Georgia. It didn't last long. It was called the Yard Doctors. It was a lawn care business. And our slogan was, "Hoe on, we'll be rake there." I thought we were going national, but it
didn't take off.
didn't take off like I thought it would. We had a green truck. We called it the Juniper Mobile. And me and my cousin, we would run and jump in that truck when we finally would get a call, and we would jump in like lunatics. Caleb should have been with us. We would still be going, Caleb. We would jump in that truck, and we would go, "Yard doctors, yard doctors." We had our own siren. We would scream "Yard Doctors" as loud as we could riding through Gainesville. I don't know why it didn't last, but we had a lot of fun, I can tell you that. I think, listen, our forefathers battled this little rickety old ship called the Mayflower and got here to the U.S. You shouldn't even take the Mayflower across Lake Lanier. That boat was not a seaworthy vessel. And, the Pilgrims got on that boat and got here. And it wasn't like there was like 400 people here on the banks going, "All right, there, man, we're glad you guys are here." And then when they finally got here, out of the 132 people, only 53 folks survived that first winter. I mean, it was hellacious what those people went through. But you know what? These guys were pioneers. These guys were entrepreneurs. These guys were tradesmen and merchants, and they got here and they figured it out. And then they hadn't been here but just a couple of years, and they said, "You know what? This is really," I can't blame them for wanting to move away from the Northeast, but they're like, "Hey, you know what? We're going to build a horse and buggy, and we're going to get on that, and we're going to go out west." Not only were they entrepreneurs, they were salesmen. How in the world, after they got their wife on the Mayflower, did they get that same woman to get on the horse and buggy? How in the world, now I want to ask you, how in the world did they get that horse and buggy across the Mississippi River? Have you ever thought about that? It wasn't like they waited on a dry season and then got that thing across that river. But they figured it out. And you know what? It wasn't an easy trip. Well, if you can help foster this entrepreneurial spirit within your kids, this is what I told my youngest son. "Tyler, I want you to start a business." He started this little business. I think it was called Selfish Alley Outfitters. And he was selling, he loved fishing. He was selling fishing apparel and equipment, lures, all kinds of stuff that he had manufactured. And I told Tyler, I said, "Tyler, if you will start a business before you start college, when you get to college, you will listen differently in marketing. You will listen different in history. You will listen different in accounting. You will listen different in English and writing. All of these subjects are going to be, your ears are going to be tuned in a little bit differently." And look, I know the life of the entrepreneur is not the most easy life, but think about this, and I'll get off this soapbox. Neither's being an employee. It's amazing when things hit the fan, how quick these companies can let people go, and what you thought was security is gone right out from under you. And so I just think if you look at the trajectory of where we're going, like a lot of us, we bought into the lie of the big corporate is going, they're going to take care of you, and man, they've got your best interests in mind, and you need to go work for the big mammoth, da-da-da-da-da, and then in 55 years they're going to give you a gold watch, and it's just going to be a hallelujah party. So I just think as you and I survey the trajectory of where we're going as a nation, helping foster entrepreneurship is probably a wise thing. All three of our kids are business owners, and
One thing just to add to that, it kind of goes along with that, but just on a side note is, if you're trying to encourage your kids to be readers, which is a very good thing, but also be a continual learner that we talked about. I mean, there were times when our kids were teenagers and Steve really wanted to push them in reading and learning new things.
I bribed them.
He paid them to read books. He'd hand them a book and go, if you read that book right there, I'll pay you $20 or $50. It would have to be 50 today probably, but 20 was a lot of money back then, and so he paid them, to encourage them, whether they wanted to read it or not, but if they just took a nugget out of that book that he was wanting them to get the principles
Oh, I could
from.
help get to motivation, trust me.
All right, the last one is teach your children to take responsibility versus victim mentality. So we all are seeing this today, right? I mean, and it was in our generation. It's been in every generation, right? But I think it's becoming more vocal. We're seeing it more in social media because it can be broadcast out to the world.
Politics.
So, look, there are some very unfortunate things that have happened to people from the beginning of time, right? And whether it was parents, aunts, uncles, tragedy that has happened, and it's sad and it's heartbreaking, right? But what we're talking about here is when there's been some wrong, and we've got a young couple, a friend, and he grew up in a terrible family environment. But you know what he's doing? He's like, I want to, as a parent today, change the future of my family for generations to come. I want to get out of the cycle that's in my past, and I want to make a difference for the future, right? And so that's kind of what we're talking about versus living it. And it's easy. And you know what? A lot of us will look at them and go, I can see exactly why they are where they are today. And we don't blame them, right? It's awful what happened or what they went through. So no matter where they are. But what we're just saying is if we can start fostering this with our children and take responsibility. If you've done something wrong or something has happened, don't live in this and move forward, right? Make a difference in the future.
Tina and I have a client who I think this young man, encapsulates what we're talking about. This guy, because of his family heritage, he grew up kind of Mennonite Amish background, and he dropped out of school when he was in 7th grade. And
it was expected of him to do that.
Yeah, it was expected because he had to work on the family farm and build rocking chairs. I mean, that's what Amish people are good at. And, I mean, they're really good rocking chairs. And so this guy, he drops out of school and, he's working on the farm literally like free labor. I mean, 60 hours a week. I mean, like many of us in this room, we would call that some type of child abuse. But this guy did it. It was expected of him. And when he got a little bit older, like he totally rebelled and just got away from, Jesus and his family and all kinds of things. But he took responsibility. He wasn't a victim. And when this young man was maybe 23, 24 years old, here he is, doesn't have can't get a good job. He doesn't, he's like, he had scraped together like $400 or $500, and he built a shed. Like the shed that you'd put in your backyard? He built a shed with the money that he had. Well, then after he sold that shed, he was able to buy 2 sheds. Then after he bought those sheds and then sold those sheds, he was able to build 4 sheds. And then after that, he just kept doing this. Well, when he was 31, Tina and I just helped him sell his business. He sold it for $12 million. Okay? This was a young man who, although life had been very unfair to him, he did not become a victim. Although he didn't get the education that everybody else got, you know what? He didn't care. He didn't make excuses. This guy was a hard-working son of a gun, and he buckled down under it, felt the responsibility, and he built an amazing company. This guy was making, $2.5, $3.5 million personally out of his company when he sold it, and then, it was an amazing story. And so I think as parents, there's a tendency, especially today with what's popular, everybody's just a victim of all these awful things that have happened to us. I'm glad to see young guys like Joshua's like, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to go out and make my own way, and that's what he did.
All right, so we're going to just briefly talk about this. Teach your children about finances. We could spend a whole session on this, but just real quickly, this is important, right? Is money part of life? That is a very important part of life, right? So we need to be teaching our kids, whether it's through starting a business or if they get allowance or whatever that looks like in your family, we need to be teaching them to manage their money and live within their means, right? If you've got $5 saved and you want a toy that costs $7, do you want to really pull out $2 extra and give to them, or do they need to work a little bit harder to make that money so they can buy that $7 toy, right? Even starting with that young. And as they get older, one of the things that my mom did with me as a teenager is I had to have my own bank account. I started working, I needed my own bank account, and so I had to learn how to manage and balance my checkbook as a young teenager, as an older teenager, right? And then, so that's number one. Number two is practice generosity, the joy of giving. Let your children see you give and be generous, and this can look like a lot of different ways. We give to the church, and I don't know if y'all even still have the little envelopes. When we grew up, we had little envelopes that we tithed in, and so we would take our money to Sunday school or whatever and take that to church. So at an early age, Steve's grandmother, every time he cut the grass, would have 3 jars on top of her refrigerator, and one of those was to the Lord, one was for savings. He goes, what about the rest of it? Well, I'm going to put that in that jar, and I'll give that to you at the end of the summer. She wouldn't even let him have his leftover. But she was teaching him principles of how to manage your money. And so, and the joy of giving, we can do that whether it's with our time, our resources, right? But we've got to model that in front of them, and we want to be able to teach them. And not that we have to do it, but it's a joy to do it. And as the Lord allows you and your family, and as your child gets older and starts making their own money, the reason that it's a joy or that we make money is to be able to provide for our family, but also to bless others, right? And so we just want to model that for our children. And then the third thing is invest early. Know the power of compound interest. Look, if there's anything that you can teach your young, maybe post-high school or even in high school, but even young married, if you've got grown kids that are married or have a career that they've started, teach them to take advantage of retirement funds and putting a little bit. Pull out, there's maps, there's all kinds of stuff, you can look it up online, but to show them if you only put $100 a month away by the time you retire, look how much this money has grown because of compound interest. Give them a physical, listen, we did this one thing with our kids. We said it was kind of an incentive for them to save their money versus just make money and spend it, because, kids, that money's burning a hole in your pocket. I had 2 kids that the minute they got money, they had to go spend it. Another child, he put his money aside and he was saving it for exactly what he had his sights set on. Right? We went to Disney World one time. We gave them each a allotted amount of money. You can buy, this is your money. When it's gone, it's gone. Well, 2 of the kids blew every single penny probably within the first hour. The third one, he goes, I need to find the store. I know where one of my friends got this thing. He wanted juggling sticks. Y'all know what those juggling sticks are? That's what he had his sights set on. It cost this amount of money. He had $10 left over. Guess what? He came home with $10 in his pocket. So, teach them to invest early, how to manage.
Our kids being thousandaires?
Oh, yeah, thousandaires. Oh, yeah, so this one thing I was getting there for the savings. So we were teaching our kids to save. And so we said, you know what? If you save $500, we will match that.
And you will be thousandaire.
And you will be a thousandaire. So when our first child did that, we have pictures of this. We went to the bank and got 5 $100 bills so we could show the magnitude of how much money that was. We laid it out all over the table.
I like to hype stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all know that about him, but he definitely went above and beyond. We made a banner and said, "Welcome to the Thousandaire Club," and all this stuff. But guess what? We were trying to instill with him, there's some benefits in saving your money, right? This money can multiply.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of like cool board games that you can play with, small children and stuff that start teaching them about money and investing, buying assets versus buying liabilities and all of those kind of things.
If you play Monopoly, it's only like 5 hours to get through that game.
Yeah, like if you play Monopoly with my kids, it's like a war. Like we're arguing,
We've had to ban that from
we're
the
ready to have
family
like a fist
gatherings.
fight. It's not fun.
right.
Our kids, we drove this point, so we probably, my family likes to say that I can beat a dead horse with a dead horse. So I've got a little bit of a tendency to kind of go off on things obsessively a little bit. And like, I guess we did that on finances because like when my kids were a little bit older, they were young, they were in their early 20s, they wrote a book called Millennials and Money. So if you ever want to see what the principles are that Tina and I were teaching our kids, we did not write the book. Our kids wrote it, so you could look up Sarah Meadows and William Wright. Tyler could not get his name on the book, although he wrote about 90% of it because he was working for a financial institution and it was a there was a compliance issue, so the one who actually wrote the book didn't get to have his name on the book. And so the other two were like, they thought that was really cool. They're like, we didn't really write the book, but so anyway, finance is really big. I want to talk about raising athletes. Any of you have kids that participate in sports? Okay, I'm a big proponent. I think you should have kids. If you have kids, you should put them in sports. I think it's really important and helpful. Back in the day, America was an agrarian society. That meant you worked on the farm. That meant, the crops had to come in. That meant like, the cow, the mule would kick you, and yet like there was 101 ways for you to, get blisters and bloody your nose. Okay, we live in a society today that just wants to pamper our kids and make it easy for them to, get all the trophies and awards and that kind of thing. Well, sports, if you participate in sports, because we don't live in an agrarian society, it is a great way, you see number 2, it's a great way for them to experience failure and get their noses bloodied. They have to face disappointment, failure. Someone else gets to start, someone else goes through this, all of those things. So I'm a big proponent. One of the things that I would encourage you early on if your kids are participating in sport, because it's real easy for them to, if they're like me, to have their identity wrapped up in the sport that they're participating in. And I would just say one of the statements that you could constantly make to your kids is this: make his name great. They're getting ready for a game tonight. Hey, Tyler, listen, when you go out there tonight, the priority tonight, no matter what happens, make his name great. Because if it's all about winning and losing, you are going to ride a constant roller coaster of emotions. But if you teach your kids that what really is at stake tonight isn't necessarily even that they win or lose, we all want them to win, but half the people that show up for the game are going to lose. Think about it. The Friday night, the football game, whenever North Hall, all of these schools in the state of Georgia, after the first Friday night, half of them have a losing record. Already. It's just week 1 and you're on the 0 for train. 0 for 1, 0 for 2, 0 for 3. Whew, it's terrible. But you know what? You can lose and you can still make his name great, right? So that's important. before I mention this third part, because this third point is that you've got to help your kids connect the dots between competitiveness and extra hard work. Look, if you let your kids participate, like Paul even said it, like when you compete, you compete to win the prize. Well, I mean, don't put your kid out there hoping that they're going to be some successful and they're lazy. It's just not going to come that easy. I competed in wrestling. I mean, all of you guys look up here at the stage and see me, and you're like, wow, that is a really big monster guy. I bet he was a wrestler. No, you probably aren't thinking that. You're like, that little scrawny guy was a wrestler? But I was fairly good. I was pretty good, okay? One of the goals in wrestling that you want to ultimately get to if you're wrestling in college is you want to win. Ultimately, you want to win 100 matches. Like if you can win 100 matches, that means that as a freshman in college, you were able to make the varsity team, the travel team, but you had to win 25 matches, which is really, really hard because when you're a freshman, most of the guys that you're going to be wrestling against are juniors and seniors. But you've got to go 25, 25, 25, 25 to get to 100. Yeah, that equals 100. Okay, see, well, and I don't say this to be boastful, but when I finished wrestling, I won 159 matches, and I lost 12. I was a 3-time college All-American. That meant I finished 5th in the nation. I finished 3rd in the nation, and then my senior year, I became the first person from the state of Georgia to ever win a collegiate national championship out of this state. I was pretty good. I got to go to Russia on one of the U.S. wrestling teams. Okay, so I believe if you take the mat, if you take the field, if you go out there, do it to win. But one of the things that you need to help your kid connect the dots on, think about this for a moment. If you show up to practice on Monday night, and let's say practice is an hour and a half, and your kid goes out there and he practices, she practices, they're out there for an hour and a half, they come back, maybe there's 10 other people on the team, come back, and then Tuesday they practice again. How is your child going to get a degree of separation from all of those other 9 kids just on their team, not on a county level or a state level or a national level, but if they're actually doing the exact same thing that everybody else is doing, you're not going to be any better. Like you've got to put in extra work. You've got to put in and one of the things that my dad taught me, 2 things. Wrestling in the state of Georgia, when I was a wrestler here, Georgia was terrible. There wasn't a lot of really good wrestlers here. So every summer, my dad would put me in the car and we would drive to Iowa City, Iowa. And we would go to the University of Iowa for the high school championship stuff. And I would go up there and I'd get my butt kicked twice. On the way up there, my dad say, Steve, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good do you think you are? I'm like, well, I didn't lose any matches this year in Georgia, Dad. I guess I'm like an 8 or a 9. He's like, oh, awesome. You're really good. We'd go up there. I'd get my butt kicked. We'd get back in the car, 18-hour drive home. Hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good do you think you are? I'm a 1. I'm terrible. Well, you're going to have to work harder because those boys from Iowa, they're going to kick your tail. And so you've just got to put it. And then the second thing that my dad taught me is you can control the controllables. If wrestling practice in college starts at 4 o'clock, you can show up at 3:30. And when everybody else leaves at 6 o'clock and they're coming out of the showers, you can still be on that mat working on moves. So I think athletics gives us the opportunity to do those things and to compete at a level of, because you're going to learn some things about putting in that extra work that's going to help you in your career, your marriage, parenting, those kind of things.
And if you can help your child find what they're passionate about, so they will be driven to become better. So we're not saying just force your child to play sports to be an athlete. So I mean, if they're a musician,
right,
and they want to learn the guitar, than from
Yes.
practice, whatever that is. And it may be they try one sport and that one just doesn't work. I mean, we had one that tried football. He came home with a bloody, I mean, he just was so small compared to all the other boys. We went, all right, let's go golf. So there's no physical, and so we did that. You just help them find what they're passionate about, what
You
they
guys,
enjoy
yeah,
doing.
you guys live at a great time. Like, there's so many things to compete in. Archery. I mean, there is 1,001 things that you can get into that you can teach these things. It doesn't have to be wrestling or sports.
Yeah. All right, so we are going into our Q&A, and we have about 15 minutes to get through some of these questions.
Let's nail some of them.
So, all right. We've got a lot here. These are some great questions. We were trying to see if any of them were the same, and none of them really were the same. So we're going to try to get through and briefly talk about each one as quick as we can. So I'll read it, and then one of us will address it. How would you address the tone, disrespect from two teenagers when in a situation where the reinforcement from their father is not present, single mom, because you're in the home of a single mom? I feel outnumbered.
Yeah. One of the things I would encourage you in that situation, if you feel out, the reason you feel outnumbered is because you are outnumbered. Okay? So you're exactly right. But one of the ways that you level the playing field is you get around other godly men, other godly families, like you have your family over at the Swans, you're over at Lindsay's and Adam's house. You're leveling the playing field so that the numbers are more and so the more that you're around those type of situations where you're leveling the playing ground, you're then allowing other people, because I don't know if you notice this, but with teenagers, one of the wisest things that you can do is take them over to your friend's house or one of, somebody at church. They're going to say the exact same things that you said, verbatim. And then your kid's going to come home, Mom, you're not going to believe this. Caleb told me that 2 + 2 = 4. And they're going to be like blown away because now Caleb, okay? And so it's just a way for you to level the playing ground.
And I think too, I mean, the kids that we're speaking about now that are teenagers, I think part of that is, and I'm sure you've had to be, but be honest with them. This is hard. I am doing the very best I can. I am making sacrifices. I mean, sometimes you just have to kind of help them have a reality check, right? And help them. I mean, you just have to be honest with them. This isn't ideal, but this is where we are, and I need your help. So I think, and I'm sure you've had that conversation 100 times, and again, it may have to come from another party. All right, here's the second question. What is the best way to protect our kids from being influenced by the world while teaching them how to influence others for Christ? So here's just a real funny story. One of my kids were a toddler, and we walked in, and you put them in the cart. You're in Walmart. We didn't have Target back then. We put them in the cart, and all of a sudden there's this big row of, we call them little men, the little bendable men, whatever they were, but they were bad men. Like, I mean, they're mean looking and everything. And my son, he yells out, he goes, Mom, I want the bad man. And I'm thinking, worst case scenario, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's awful, he's evil. The evil has entered into his, like, why is he wanting the evil one? It's going to be all around us, right? I mean, that didn't harm him. I ended up buying them, and he played with them. And, there's good and bad, right? So you got to have both. And so, how can we protect our kids from being influenced? It's even more so than ever before because of social media, because of things that they get their hands on. But how can we protect them?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to set the guardrails. You're going to have to put the things in place. We live in a society now, though, like as your kids are getting older, like if they want to get to it bad enough, even whatever you set up, they're going to try to jump over the fence, dig under the fence, or go around the fence. Right? There's so much availability to all of this junk that's out there. But I will say this: there was a time and age where we were sending missionaries into villages to minister to cannibals all around the world. I'm not talking about Tina and I, I'm talking about the Christian church, right? So there's always this balance of having our kids so grounded in Christ that the protection really isn't us fortifying some wall of protection that really isn't that fortified, but it's what God has done in their heart. That I remember when I went to wrestle at Carson Newman, and man, it just so happened that all of the guys on my wrestling team, man, they were just a bunch of pagans at the time. I mean, they were just, the first night we were there, some of them got arrested for public intoxication, just all of the, I mean, every weekend they're, hey, this is where we're going to go and get high and get drunk, and here I am, I've got little, I had just gotten saved, I had crosses on my wrestling shoes. They thought I had just lost my mind. And so, this is going to sound like a real cheesy answer, but man, part of it is really praying for God's protection on their life and depending on the Lord to protect them, because we're just not going to be able to go with them to provide all the protection that we want to do.
Yeah. Do you think that a child can be too young or inexperienced to receive salvation? Can a 4 to 7-year-old fully comprehend the decision that they must make to turn away from self and live wholeheartedly for Christ?
Yes, that your child can be too young to fully understand. But let's say we're talking about a 6-year-old. Does a 13-year-old fully understand? Does a 17-year-old fully understand? Does a 32-year-old fully understand what maybe a 72 understands? So that, obviously that can be there. But there's a guy by the name of James Dobson who was one of the most influential Christians probably in the 21st century. And James Dobson says that he came to Christ when he was 4 years old. Can it happen? I'm sure that it can, but it's just one of those things. Like I think whenever we're talking about the specificity of salvation, it's really a case by case situation that you have to work through with that child, and the younger they are, the more difficult it is to know what's going on in their heart.
And you can continue to have those conversations, right? I mean, we have children that we believe became a Christian before 7. So it can happen. It's just a case by case, and you continue to have those. You don't want them to doubt their salvation, but you want them to be confident in their salvation, right? So, all right, what do you do when your teen lies and is good at it and sticks with his lies till the lie is absolutely proven a lie? Tell them to go into politics, right? LOL. Maybe they're a future politician. Maybe you should encourage that. No, I'm kidding.
But which party of the?
No, we're not going there. We're not touching that one at all. So, we had a situation with one of ours as a teenager that just flat out lied when we
had a 32-ounce.
Go ahead.
Oh, never mind. I opened up the refrigerator one day, and there was like a Big Daddy can of beer sitting right there. And I thought, my sweet wife, she's finally cracked. I mean, man, this is awesome. My wife has got a big old Budweiser right there. But, I probably drove that woman crazy. She deserves it. Go, honey. If anybody deserves to drink a big old beer, go. Yes. So I went and asked her, I said, honey, you need to put that behind the sweet tea or the kids are going to see it. She said, honey, that's not mine. I was like,
So anyway, we approached the only child that had been home while we were out of town. And
it wasn't him.
It wasn't him. So we were, we were thinking, well, maybe it was we had some workers coming in. And so anyway, long story short,
it was him.
They're good, right? They can be very good. And that little 4-year-old with the painting on the wall can be just as good as that 16-year-old, right? And so
And
you know.
I think, honestly, you can almost make light of it with them. I think you can almost say, you know what? Hey, you think you're a really good liar? That's the same thing that Eve did. That's the same thing. Hey, we all tend to lie to ourselves. But you know what? We know that God can see all, and whatever we think that we're hiding from God, He sees it. I don't even have to know how the beer showed up. I bet you know, and I know that God knows. And if you don't want to admit it, you don't want to talk about it, that's fine.
Our
But
kids have to learn that just because we don't catch you, it's not okay, right? Because that's going to carry through the rest of their life. And so by teaching them that there is somebody that does know and you can't outrun him and you can't outlie him.
yeah, there was a guy, I can't remember, David Meese was his name. He was a contemporary Christian musician, and he said that when his mom would leave the house, he could always tell because she had a really loud muffler. And so he was a really good musician, so he'd be playing his piano. Well, as soon as his mom would drive off, he would pull out the secular rock and roll music and start playing it, on the piano. And he thought, I'm just being a little, hellion, rebellious guy. And he's in there playing, whatever it was that he was playing. And then all of a sudden, he's hearing Mom pull back. He pulls it back out. How great thou art. He's playing. Next day she leaves, the muffler. Well, one day the mom drives off, and while she was out, she gets her muffler fixed. Comes home, busted. And so, it was a way he talks about how his mom said to him, hey, David, I just want you to know God doesn't have a bad muffler, right? And so helping our kids understand that final accountability, final discipline, Hebrews 12, comes from the Lord.
All right, here's one. Any other recommendations for young adult children who won't come to church? We really thought we brought them up in the Lord. And I'd say as a young adult, and I think an older teenager, that's when you're stepping back and you're praying. I mean, you can't force them to go to church, right?
And what did you say at the end?
We really thought we brought them up in the Lord. You did.
You did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that maybe that's not where they are today, that's okay. Like they're going to have to take ownership of this. And it may take a week, a month, a year, 5 years. It's okay. And that helps us show a greater dependency on the Lord to make this a matter of prayer.
Yeah. As a grandma, how do I continue to be a spiritual influence to my grandkids and not a parent to my grandkids, especially when my kids instruct my grandkids against some things that the Bible says are true? I'll just give an example from my family. My brother, I have 3 brothers. One brother, we were all raised in the same home with Christian principles, right? And so there was a time that he was taking on a new job, and his wife was starting school. Anyway, they asked my mom to come live with them to help with the grandkids for just a short, like a few weeks or a month or something like that. Well, my mom went, and you know what my brother said? And my brother kind of walked away from the church. He just really wanted to do his own thing and make his own decisions, and he didn't want to be a hypocrite in church. Like, we're not all hypocrites of some sort, right? But he didn't want to be that person living one way one day and the other, so he just chose to live this way. Well, you know what he did? He came to my mom and he said, Mom, will you pray with my kids? Will you teach them the Bible? Like, he knew, even though he wasn't willing to take that responsibility on, but it still was important for him. And I mean, even if your kids are teaching your grandkids, maybe instructing them differently, there's ways that you can still, without overstepping your boundaries, right? But you can still teach them the ways of the Lord.
I used to get off the school bus every day at my grandmother's house. And you better believe she was like a bazooka gospel presenter. I mean, she would present the gospel, and when she told you about Jesus, she made it sound like devil was in behind the church with a bus, packing up a load to take to hell that afternoon. She wasn't playing around. Steve, I noticed, you know the Bible says that all sinners and liars go to hell. And I was probably like 2 years old, or, you know. I wasn't that young, but, I mean, she just shared the gospel. I mean, we would play checkers. She never did let me beat her at checkers either. But that's where I get my competitive spirit from. But we'd be playing checkers. She's singing Amazing Grace. This, out of all the songs in the world, I want you to hear Amazing Grace one more time. And so,
but you know, I mean, we're figuring this out, right? We're young grandparents, into being grandparents. But one of the things that not parenting that you can do is take time to smell the roses, right? When you're in the thick of parenting and you're running and you're doing and that calendar's full, and I mean, sometimes it is really hard to stop and say, you know what, let's just look at the sky and see what God created. Let's go plant something.
Sprinkle it in.
Yeah, sprinkle it in as you're spending time with them, and
point to it.
I think you can be a great spiritual influence. I assume you're grateful you raised your kids prior to smartphones and social media. Yes. But for us parents who are, well, actually toward the end, which was even the worst, we started getting smartphones.
Our kids had smartphones, and
in high school they did.
Yeah, they had, you know,
we were trying to figure,
Facebook and stuff like that.
We did have to address that. But for us parents who are in the midst of it, do you have advice? Now, there's a whole lot more things you can do with that now, but I mean, they had access to internet, so we dealt with the boys, you know, free access to pornography. I mean, we dealt with all of that. And so how would you navigate that through it?
Yeah, I mean,
and there's a lot of ways. Yeah.
I think social media is the spawn of Satan. I mean, it just, but what are you going to do? I mean, it is what it is. And some of the content on social media is just like, what in the world were you thinking, you know? But it's here to stay. Like, just because I have an opinion on it doesn't make it disappear. And so I will tell you, I am on social media. I'm active on social media. If you're going to give me a platform to say Jesus, 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 I'm going to jump on it all day long, and I'm going to try to be a messenger for good and the gospel. And so, how does that relate back to your kids? I will tell you one thing. It's almost like a sneaky way to spy on your kids. It's almost a sneaky way to kind of see where your kids are. Now, when's the right time to let your kids get on that stuff? You're going to have to, the longer you can wait, the better. Like, I think the perfect age, to let your kids get on, it's like 45 or 50 years old.
And that's questionable.
Yeah, that's questionable. But since your kids are on it, you know, I would encourage you, early on, I think you need to help your kids navigate and see this as a gospel tool, and see if you can begin training and equipping them to be missionaries on social media if they're using it. I mean, you know, Howie and Hillary, they do a good job with it. I follow them, and you know, I just love the interaction, because they're in there, they're talking about different things, you know, work and stuff like that, and then the next post is like Jesus. I mean, they're bold in their proclamation of the gospel, and I think as Christian parents, we're trying to model that for them as well.
Yeah, and be on, talk to them. Just say, look, I can't control everything. You're going to have to be the one to go past that. Turn your head on. I mean, like, you just have to honest conversations.
If you have a daughter, I mean, if you have a son, daughter that are getting on social media, hey, look, I'm going to go ahead and give in, but I'm going to tell you this first year, this first 6 months, this first 5 years that you're on social media, I'm going to have full access to your account. Because all of those weirdos that are sending messages, private messages, stuff like that, I'm going to track that joker down, and no, not really. Well, kind of serious. But that way, I mean, you just tell them, hey, I'm going to let you go there, but I'm going to help you monitor this.
We have a friend that has several teenagers in their home, and I mean, they have the kids, the boys, before they go to bed, put them downstairs. They have to keep their phones. They're not allowed to go in their rooms.
I
Now,
think
that's-
really one of the things, like I mentioned, Gil, the guy who has 5, like 3 of his kids right now are sharing a family smartphone. That's a pretty good idea. Hey, we're not going to get both of you a phone, but now you have to be a little bit more
There's some
careful.
accountability.
There's some accountability because I know my little brother's going to be, so.
Yeah. All right. If my kids never accept Christ or choose to walk away from Christ, how do I protect my heart from breaking? Do I let go and just enjoy my kids for the sake of not crying the rest of my life? You love them. You just have to keep loving them and pray that they will turn their hearts back to Christ. I mean, that you do have to love them.
It is, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking.
Okay, regarding devotional time, is it appropriate to have focal points of discussion, topics that have been initiated by randomness through activities, coloring puzzles, outdoor play, then made relational? Absolutely. Look, like we said the other night, you don't have to have an organized devotional time. It may be, say, hey, we're going to all go out, we're going to do this thing together, and you work in a biblical principle or work in scripture or whatever that looks like for you. But it isn't not even a designated time. You want it, this is kind of throughout their life, right? Throughout the day. It does not have to be at 6 o'clock. This is what we're doing. I mean, that can be okay, but you don't want to, that's the only time you speak of Christ in your home, right? So, yes, that is absolutely okay. What tips or pointers do you have for raising strong-willed and stubborn children?
I don't know. All 3 of ours were angels.
And so was he, not strong-willed at all. I don't know. I really don't know. I just, pray and just hang on.
I mean,
you know?
our kids.
Drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah, my daughter was strong-willed. My middle son, we thought he was compliant. He ended up being the most strong-willed and most stubborn. And then our youngest son was just like a locomotive, passionate.
I will tell you this, like our daughter, we were talking about different personalities. You know, you want your kids to kind of see through your eyes. Well, I had one girl, and I thought for sure she would see through, like, my lens, right? Well, we were so different. Our personalities were so different, and that caused some battlegrounds along the way just because she didn't see what I saw, right? But one of the things, you know, for her, I remember laying in bed one night. I mean, literally, she's probably 5 years old. And I told Sue, I said, I'm so exhausted. I mean, I feel like she just runs all over me. And here I'm the parent, and she's only 5 years old, just because I didn't know how to manage. I didn't know because she was so strong-willed and manage. And then, you know, Steve, look, honey, one day when she's 16, we're going to want her to be strong-willed. When that little boy tries something on her, you want her to be able to say no. And so that kind of helped me put in perspective every day when we were having our little coffee. Lord, I'm going to appreciate this one day. I'm going to appreciate this one day.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the deal. I mean, if all of the men and women that a lot of us in this room respect today, they were probably just hellions as little kids, right? But they were very strong-willed. Like, we definitely don't want to parent that out of them. I mean, you just hang on tight, bridle that horse, that stallion, and ride it as best you can. And that little devil, I mean, I hate to say it, but man, you know, they're strong-willed. You're just going to have to try to contain that as best you can. Channel it until hopefully the Lord gets that child surrendered to his will and his mission, because that strong-willed child as an entrepreneur is powerful. That strong child as a Christian leader, some of you in this room, hey, you may cross your arms and sit there and look all Baptist-y and all that, but I know some of you guys, that's you, right? And so God ordained it in a really neat way, and so it's tough for a moment, for sure.
All right, we're going to try to get through a couple more questions real quick. How does one prepare to be a first-time parent mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually? So let me just address this. Enjoy your sleep now. Know that you will forever be mentally and emotionally changed. And pray. Now, look, we talk a lot because it's life, that sometimes parenting is messy and it's difficult. But parenting is also can bring most joy in your life and the most wonderful times. There's just no other love that you'll ever experience unless you're a parent, right? And so hear us say parenting is a privilege, right? It is not a chore. It is a privilege. It can be hard at times, but you will never be prepared to parent. I can just promise you that. You could read every book that's ever been written on parenting, and you're not going to be prepared for day one. So just look forward to it and pray that the Lord will give you what you need for your particular children, and that's how you prepare for it. And then you know what? Another thing that was very wise and probably came from my mom and maybe from some other women, but you take it one day at a time, right? You take it one day at a time. Don't be fearful about what's to come. Enjoy today and do what you can, and don't think that you're a failure at the end of the day. You're going to make mistakes. Give yourself some grace and just enjoy it. And enjoy every season. Don't look forward always to the next season, and because you will look back and I wish I had taken the time to enjoy those seasons a little bit more. Okay. This one, okay, first of all, let me read this one funny one. This is great. How would you handle this? My child didn't finish his supper and wanted dessert. I told him no. He went to get the last cookie anyways, and I told him if he got it, I'd give him a spanking. He then asked if he could take the spanking, could he have the cookie? As I'm trying not to laugh, he gets the cookie. I told him no, then he licks the cookie and hands it back over. What would you do? Well, here's what I did. I licked the other side and handed it back. I mean, I have no words. This is the best. I mean, that is the funniest thing. I love it. You know
I want that child to be mine. That is a cool kid. I love that kid right there.
He's thinking, yeah. That's great. All right, here's something that I think is just as a comment, not really a lot of thoughts on this, but I think it is a great point, and Steve and I talked about this. You want your children, grandchildren, to be able to come to you, come home always, know that they can come home always, no matter what they've done. They should always have a safe haven in life. That was probably the best advice that was given to us when we were walking through some of our darkest moments, is always make your home available and allow them to have a safe haven to come home to when they're ready. You can't force them, but when they're ready. I think that's... That's incredible. And that's what the church is all about, because I will tell you that we called on some of our friends when Steve couldn't maybe be there. We called in the troops, right? Hey, we need your help, because he will listen to you. He feels safe with you, right? Or with me. So that's great. Thank you for being that way.
You know, I have this, like we've been talking about our farm, like I can't tell you all summer long, these dads, Steve, my son needs to come down and work on the farm for a day, if you get my drift. When would be a good day? And I mean, like every other day, I've got like a teenage knucklehead. Hey, my son got a DUI last week, and can he come down? He needs some Uncle Steve time.
We've only been there 2 months, but it's already...
They're all taking the tour of duty down at Steve's house.
We're kind of Uncle Steve and Aunt Tina to a lot of kids. Yeah. So, all right, real quick, how do you develop parenting strategies using a biblical perspective? Is it on a situation-by-situation basis?
Yeah, on that, I would just say, you know, you have to determine very early to either you're going to be a reactive parent or you're going to parent using biblical principles. Well, how can you parent using biblical principles if you don't know what the principles are? We've talked about those all weekend, and so you've just got to, you know, just like you're the old cowboy. You've got to put the bullets in your gun, and you've got to know what they are, and you're just going to have to like keep rehearsing them and getting them out and make it part of your practice.
Yeah. All right, this is a good one. How or what do you recommend doing to win your teen, young adult child's heart to you as a parent and ultimately to the Lord so they don't become another prodigal statistics? I will tell you this. We used to lay in bed and Steve would always ask me when our kids were like preschooler, which one's going to rebel? Which one's going to rebel? And I'm like, why are you asking me that? I mean, like, don't ask. My kids are sweet. I mean, I know we have issues on a daily basis, but none of them. I don't know what you're talking about.
And it was always the one that we're like, well, probably not that one because that one's like very compliant.
Yeah. So how do you win? I hate to tell you, but you do the best you can. You're gonna do everything you can raising that child up, but ultimately it's not you, right? You just keep doing everything you can, praying for that child, but it's them that's gonna have to surrender their heart. Okay. What is the best way to keep your teenager in check while dealing with repetitive disobedience?
You answer that one.
No, I'll let you answer. We don't have an answer. Can we plead the fifth on that one? Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know.
Yeah,
Keep your teenager in check.
Yeah, so keep your child in check. I mean, man, that's a really wide open statement, right? Because, what I might think is in check
Yeah.
and what you see as not being in check may be like, you talk to a lot of parents around this room who've really had hellacious situations and kids, like they would love to be maybe dealing with what the situation.
Sometimes it's good to talk to other people.
Yeah,
Steve will
yeah.
assure parents sometime like,
Here's what I would do on that one. Go talk to your pastor. Just go Monday morning and then let them assess for you on a scale of 1 to 10. This is a 2 or a 7. And let them help you come up with what the strategy is going to be, because if they're in the youth group and then Caleb needs to be pulled in and be aware of this situation that's going on, he may be oblivious to it. I think there's a tendency, somehow we think we're better Christian parents by protecting our kids and not real, like we already know, like your kids are like knucklehead crazy, like they're dealing with hormones, they're all over the place, their emotions are, our poor little girls are becoming young ladies and that whole mess, and it's just crazy, right? Well, the more that we can just sit down and be transparent with the people that God's placed in our life as spiritual leaders, the more that we can open those channels of conversation open, it's going to help us. You've got to run to it.
okay, real quick, what book should I read if expecting? I haven't been expecting for a long time, so I'm not sure what the good ones are. So ask other young moms. There's a lot
What's a good book if you're a young mom? What's a good book?
Does anybody have a recommendation?
The Bible.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
Always.
That one should have been easy.
The Bible's a good one. I don't know. There's a lot of great books out there. So parenting books.
I would read that green one right there,
Talk
Parent
to
Privilege.
Trina. I don't know. Okay. Not that she's expecting or anything, but anyway. All right.
Back to the little boy that was stealing the cookie. Here's what I would do if I were you. I would write that story down and start my book. That is the best. That is the best intro to the book that you guys are going to write, and every parent will read that book.
Oh my gosh, that one, we'll laugh about that one. What does godly correction look like? I think we've talked about that and talked about some examples of that. And then this one, how do you suggest handling adopted children who are older when adopted and don't want to be a part of the new family? They want to stay separate and act out a lot because of it. And I will just say, we have not been in that situation, but I am sure there is a network of people, I'm not sure here or in your community. I know our daughter is very involved. They're in the process of adopting, but they have created a community of other adoptive parents, and I know she calls and talks to a lot of them. So there's other resources, but I'm sorry, I don't have any input on that.
Yeah, Tina and I won't speak to that because we haven't personally been through that, but we would say that there are some very godly networks,
Yes.
Adoption.
I think more so now than ever
Community,
before.
yeah.
That would be able to help navigate that with you.
All right, so we have thoroughly enjoyed being with you guys today. Y'all are a really awesome group of young couples to speak to, and I could not commend you more. I could not be more encouraged by the fact that you're here taking notes, learning, trying to learn this stuff. I know your pastors are very proud of you. It's just really neat being around Corinth, and man, I'm really kind of jealous because I would have loved for there to have been this gospel lighthouse in this community, because I drove up and down these streets getting in trouble all the time, and man, I think it would have made a difference in my life. I think it would have made a difference in my family's life, for my parents to have been at conferences like this. And it's I will say this to you, nobody in this room except Trina knows your pastor as well as I do, and I'm just telling you, Chris Swan is the real deal. This man, all of this stuff matters to him. All of these sermons that he's preaching to you matter deeply to him. And every Sunday morning when he gets up here and he exhorts you and encourages you, some of the times he's called me and talked to me about some of the sermons and different things that he's working through and he's thinking about, and committee meetings that he's going to. All of this stuff that he's doing, he does not take it lightly. He hasn't been doing it so long that it's just kind of become routine and he's pulling sermons out from when he was younger and da-da-da. No, that's not who this man is. And when this guy's not with you, he's living the gospel out. He's sharing Jesus. He's a man of integrity. What you see in he and Trina is 100% real. And I'm so glad to call this guy my best friend. And, we were riding to church last night, and he was talking about Hillary and how because I asked him about it. I said, hey, well, tell me about it. He said, oh, my gosh, I'm telling you, if you lived down here, you and Tina would be best friends with them. I'm telling you right now. Now, Howie's got a little bit better mustache than you. But let me tell you what, and man, he starts going on, hey, they've been here this long. Well, he starts laying out for me. Kevin, right? We're coming down, we're talking about something, and he's like, man, let me tell you. Kevin was one of the first guys in my youth group when I was a youth pastor, and let me tell you what God's doing, with his business, and he had this opportunity, and he bought all of this metal and then roofing. I don't remember the whole story, but he's laying out for me detail to detail about your life. Chris, who's that? Oh my goodness, that's Stephen Park's son. He starts telling me, your story and what God's doing, and just story after story after story after story after story after story. Tell me about you guys and how you guys are new and you just moved here, and man, you went to John MacArthur's church and you're starting a business, and man, how awesome it is that God's called you here, and Wesley over here bragging on you and how God has sent you and your wife. It's not really Wesley, but I call him Wesley from The Princess Bride. Because of his mustache. And so anyway, I'll say all that. And then here's the last thing that I want to say to you guys about social media. You guys need to be I know you're really proud of your church. This church is trying to do so many wonderful things. If you have an opportunity when Chris or the church account and they're putting stuff out there, man, you guys need to light the chatter up on all of those comments. Oh my goodness, it was really neat being at the men's event, and oh my goodness, and the youth group and the football game, and oh my goodness, they serve pizza. Oh, that's awesome. I like it. And so you guys use those things to your advantage, because so many people who are moving to this community, they need to be in this church. And they're going to be looking at social media stuff, and man, the more that you're bragging about your church, they're going to walk through these doors and they're going to fall in love with what you've fallen in love with. And so hope you guys will support your church in that way. Let me pray for.
Say real quick.
Yeah.
I just thank you guys for allowing us to be here, and I'll just say this last thing, that no matter what season that you're in of parenting, even if you're a parent yet, there may be some here that are not parents yet, and if you're grandparenting, whatever season that is, you know, reach out to your community. Don't ever feel isolated, because I will promise you there is somebody out there that is going through what you're going through. No matter what that is, whether it's changing 100 diapers a day and you're feeling exhausted, those mamas, that's hard. They're not sleeping, and the daddies are having, to get up maybe, and somebody's going to work the next day and they've been up all night. It's not hard, and you feel like you can't make it another day. Reach out to somebody that's going through that or is a few years ahead of you to tell you that it's going to be okay. If you're in the middle of child, going to school, and it's busy and you're running from ball field to ball field, and you're like, are we doing the right thing by being on this crazy schedule? Reach out to your community, and don't ever feel like you're isolated. That's so important as parents. And but thank y'all again for being here. And
You want to close this out?
Sure. And if you're going through some of those hard times in teenage years or young adult lives, I can tell you, and I do want to let you know, that our son, we have had many great conversations, and he has a beautiful wife, and he is expecting his first child now and is doing well. You know what? There may be some stuff he's still wrestling with and may wrestle with, but he loves his family, and he appreciates that we ran after him hard and that we went to our knees praying for him. So I wanted you to hear that good news, that there is hope, okay? And then, as grandparents, man, we're trying to figure that out. We want to pour into our lives. Our daughter came to us recently, and she said, Mom, I read a statistic that grandparents may have the most spiritual influence on their children, even over their parents. So we want you to speak spiritual truths to our kids. We want you to be that. And I said, we will definitely do that. That door is open. So let's pray. Thank you again for being here. Lord, thank you so much for this beautiful day. Thank you for this opportunity to allow Steve and I to come and just share our hearts and share some of the things that we have been able to experience in our parenting years, Lord, and the joys and the highs and the lows. And Lord, that we just all are trying to walk through this season of parenting, no matter what it is. Lord, looking to you for guidance and just surrounding ourselves with community. Lord, thank you for a church like this that sees the importance of encouraging young parents, middle-aged parents, and older parents, Lord, and as we grandparent, Lord, that it's just so important to keep being reminded and being pointed back to the gospel and to make that central. And Lord, thank you again for this time. We pray just a special blessing on this church and for every family that's represented here. We thank you for them. We pray that you would just help them in their whatever situation they are right now in their parenting years. Help them to enjoy their children and have laughter in their homes and to be a safe haven for their family. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.